Boy, on this Cell TV, this is a great interview. We resonate on some topics that are life-changing for you all. This is absolutely important information, hormones and beyond. But I talk about my lack of belief in fish oil. I finally found someone else that resonates with me on this, but we dig in to seed oils, the dangers, and how this can disrupt your ability to burn fat. As a matter of fact, we talk about how these fats can be stored as fats and can lead to weight loss resistance, other hormone problems. Wait till you see this video. And the good part is we give you simple things you can do now. Check it out. Hey, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Cyto Detox. Look, podcasts cost money. There's a lot of production going around this, but we are grateful to have Cyto Detox as one of the sponsors. It's so easy for me to talk about the product because myself and my family use it constantly as we practice what I preach. For over 15 years, I've talked about and taught doctors and the public about cellular detox. And I'll tell you, Cyto was a breakthrough. Cyto was a breakthrough for us. And it's changed so many lives. So we're grateful that they sponsor Cellular Healing TV. It makes sense, doesn't it? They should.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing Cyto Detox product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit detoxoffer.com. Again, that's detoxoffer.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith, and today we welcome Dr. Cate Shanahan, author of the classic book Deep Nutrition and her new book, The Fatburn Fix. Dr. Cate joins us today to discuss how the #1 most important health factor is whether you can burn your body fat or not, more important than smoking, exercise, family history, or even sleep, and how toxic body fat actually protects itself by causing sugar cravings. This is a fascinating topic, and I can't wait to hear more. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Cate Shanahan and, of course, Dr. Pompa. Welcome, both of you.
Welcome.
Hi, Dr. Pompa. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, gosh, I love all of these topics, man. I mean, these are some of my big pet peeves, right? I mean, I can't wait to dig in. How many people are eating bad fats that are causing everything that was just mentioned? I just could not agree more. And people have no clue. Even those of you watching this, it could be you, because even healthy people are getting saturated with what they think are healthy fats. So we're gonna explore that a little bit deeper. But gosh, Dr. Cate, I couldn't agree more. It's like it is. I love that. It's more important than smoking. It's more important than all of these things that we think are important. The ability to burn fat. What a great title of the book, because I say this, you could judge how healthy you are by your ability to burn your own body fat.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, there's nothing more important than that, because that's what gives you energy. And your cells don't live very long if they don't get energy. So if we are jeopardizing our energy supply to our cells, we are jeopardizing our cells' ability to function to even survive. And so I love that right behind you, fix the cell, get well. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fuel the cell, but it's the same idea. That's, the same root cause, I think, as we touched on just, before we started the conversation, is that these companies have been feeding us seed oils. And if we're not paying attention, if we don't know what they are, we're probably eating them. I can almost guarantee.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about that. So hang in there, everybody. We're going to get there, Well, when we look at this being more dangerous than everything, I mean, everything that you mentioned there, people have to understand that when we look at cancer, we know it's a metabolic problem, meaning really the inability to use your own body fat for energy, right? And when we look at, obviously the explosion of diabetes, I mean, all these conditions, this is what we're talking about. This is a cellular issue, to your point, right? This is your cell's inability to take your own body fat when you're not eating, burn it up, And, obviously it keeps you lean. But again, if you're someone out there that gets hangry, that says, I just need to eat. Oh, and by the way, I hang with healthy people. I see them eating all the time. But see, if you ask them how many meals, Dr. Cate, they would say, oh, I just eat 2 meals a day. I eat 3 meals a day. But I see them shoveling food the whole time. Oh, and it's the drinks too. But they say organic and they're healthy, kombuchas, right? But they're constantly feeding the beast, because truthfully, their mitochondria, their cells, are not able to use their own fat successfully.
No.
So therefore, it's nuts, it's this, it's that. All organic, of course. Do you see the same thing? And even though it's healthy, is that a problem still?
I do see it all the time. And yes, absolutely, it's a problem. And part of the reason that people will tell you, they'll look at you like straight in the face even and say, oh, I hardly eat anything. But as they're carrying around a big like Starbucks Frappuccino, which has 400 calories, because here's why. I mean, I always, I'm like, what's going on? Why? How could they not like literally see that? And once I came to understand that habit and the way our metabolism is driving our hunger and misleading us into thinking that, well, if we were hungry, or even worse, if we were tired, or even more powerful, if we had brain fog or were irritable and we ate something, doesn't that mean that our last meal wasn't, and we ate something, and when that makes us feel better, it alleviates. Doesn't that mean that my last meal wasn't big enough? So I kind of need this, or I'm behind. I'm not getting enough energy because I'm not eating enough calories. And so the math, doesn't happen, because unless you're, let's face it, unless you're a biohacker or you really know amounts, you're not going to know. It's hard to figure out how many calories you're actually eating. So you have to go by how you feel.
Absolutely.
And that's what I try to help people do in the book, The Fatburn Fix, is help them understand what they're feeling, recognize what they're feeling for what it is, which is a signal of a metabolic disaster where you can't burn your own body fat. And that happens if you get these hangry symptoms, if it's not just ordinary stomach grumbling hunger, that if you get busy, drink a glass of water, it just goes away because it's not an emergency. The difference is that if you get hangry or have brain fog, most of the time it just doesn't go away at all, unless something really like buzzes your adrenaline out, because adrenaline helps you dig down and release a little bit more body fat, even though you might have insulin resistance, the adrenaline helps fight against that. And it also helps you convert, get your blood sugar up as well. So but for the most part, that doesn't happen in a normal morning at work. You get you have your breakfast maybe early, 6, 7, 8. And then by mid-morning, 10, you're kind of having a little lull in your energy. And that's when a lot of people with the worst weight problems, by which I mean they've just tried so many times, they've gained and they've lost, or the worst metabolic problems, by which I mean they're on their way to getting cancer, but they don't even know it. They don't even know it. Because I say this because everybody I know who's had cancer at like a young age, in their 30s or 40s, they were snackers or grazers. And, in retrospect, it didn't even register as a thing, but in retrospect, on like kind of like deep analysis of what they did, oh yeah, I carried something around in my purse, or I had a bunch of stuff stashed in my car or in my drawers, even if their weight was normal. And so this is such an important sign that is trying to tell us, it's our body's trying to tell us, hey, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And we have to pay attention to it. And that's what I have a bunch of chapters devoted to that, and even worksheets devoted to assessing your hunger, assessing what kind of symptoms are you getting when you're hungry, because there's 11 of them that are kind of like super common flags that your metabolism is not in good shape and you are not able to burn your body fat. And I just have to excuse my hair, because people always comment on my hair when I can't get to my hairdresser. and I have not got, I'm way overdue. So
I have to ask this question. We're so off topic. What are their comments about your hair? Your hair looks thick and healthy. What's going on?
Oh, hey, thank you, Dr. Pompa. They'll say like, well, one was like, it looked like a cow licked her head. And yeah, and another one is it's asymmetrical. And
oh my gosh.
God, I've been tortured by my hair.
Let me tell you something. I hear people say, no matter what, people are critical, right? I get it all the time. So who cares, right? Yeah, it's funny. I love you already just because just the fact that you pointed that out. I just absolutely love and adore you now. I always say my wife, it's like, brain mouth, right? It's like she thinks it, it comes out, right? It was like, that's what just happened there. Like you thought you fluffed your hair and immediately it just came right out. I love it. Okay. Now we're having fun, see? This is a huge topic. You and I resonate so well on this on every aspect. It's amazing. I feel like we're kind of in the healthy world. That's most of my viewers, those looking to get healthier and do healthy things. But oh my gosh, it's like, there's so many people who don't understand these concepts that we're talking about here. So, okay, I want people to understand one thing, and you kind of said it, so I'm just kind of, proofing what you just said, but this isn't a fat, skinny thing. This happens to skinny people, fat people, and it's like, the bigger danger here is, yes, this can keep you from burning your own fat. You can gain weight loss resistance, all the cravings, failure on every diet. Yes, this is the reason why, but you could be the skinny person who tends to, when they're not able to burn their fat, they burn their muscle, right? So you get what I call skinny fat with fatty organs, that can arguably more dangerous, right? And these people end up with cancer just the same. I think you're right. The long-term game here is obviously all these hormone issues people have along the way, not feeling well, not sleeping, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. But cancer is absolutely the scariest part of this. And you said that people end in cancer. All right. So let's, talk about my book and your book really, jive well together. And most people watching this have my book, Beyond Fasting, because this is all my diet variation fasting strategies is kind of how, I utilize and fix this problem.
Nice.
And your book just kind of perfect. I love those symptoms. So let's talk a little bit about some of the symptoms, and everyone should get your book, and we'll make sure we have the link there. But talk about some of these other symptoms besides hangry, besides hungry. What are these symptoms?
Anxiety is a big one. So
I just kind of threw that off because I knew that. Yeah.
Anxiety, is brought on partly by two aspects of this, right? So one is that when your brain is not getting enough energy, thought is slowed down, or it's distorted and disturbed. And that is very anxiety provoking, especially if you're in a new circumstance, like you just started a job, or you're driving, and you're trying to find a place you've never been to before. It's super anxiety provoking when your brain is not working right. And then the other part of how all of this drives anxiety is that in order to get energy to your brain, your body releases adrenaline, and adrenaline, it makes you, jittery and anxiety prone. And, you can kind of get lost and perseverate on your failures or your bad thoughts or your bad feelings when you've got too much adrenaline in your system. So
yes.
That's a huge one. And
by the way, cortisol, it'll just drive up cortisol, which can drive anxiety, because glucose follows cortisol. And I want people listening to be clear. The reason that, she's talking about this is because your brain can only use glucose for energy unless it burns fat, your own fat, for energy, and then it makes ketones, and the brain can use ketones. So if you are not able to burn your own fat for energy, guess what it needs? Glucose. So if you're not eating, guess what it does? Anxiety, right? So it's either cortisol or adrenaline to get the glucose to the brain. Am I right?
Absolutely. Both of those do the job. And the way I look at the difference is that like cortisol is kind of like the slow motion version of adrenaline, right? Like adrenaline, you can have a thought and boom, it'll yeah, exactly. And you can feel your heart pounding and stuff like that. But cortisol is more like on a continual daily basis. It kind of goes up. And then if you are chronically stressed, all your cortisol rhythms get off. And as I'm sure you've talked about. So that's anxiety. And then the next one is brain fog. And these are super duper related. Obviously, you're not getting energy to your brain. So you might be staring at work, and this is in a different kind of circumstance. You're not necessarily in some sort of intense, I got to figure it out situation, but more in like a slow kind of boring-er situation where, oh, I can't wait for lunch. And then you're just staring at your job, at your tasks that you have to do or whatever it is. And you can't get your head wrapped around it the way that you feel that you would like to get the stupid thing in front of you done. That's brain fog, and that's how it happens. And that's again for low brain energy. And then another one is dizziness. And in fact, such severe dizziness can happen that people actually have nausea and vertigo. Like they have to sit down. So vertigo is a kind of severe dizziness where this seems like the room is spinning, or you have to hang on to something, you lose your balance. And I've had a couple of folks who have, when their blood sugar drops, and it doesn't have to be, because they can't burn their body fat, their blood sugar can drop from say like 110, which is just a little bit high, to something like, 80, which is actually within normal. And I'll see that happen because I do continuous glucose monitors with some of my patients. Mm-hmm. And that'll be the moment where they're like, oh my God, I'm getting one of my dizzy spells. I have to sit down. And so the fix for that is being able to burn your body fat. So that's another super common one. And then heart palpitations are also very, very common, again, because of the adrenaline. Mm-hmm. Shaking because of the adrenaline. You can also get cold extremities, or some people have told me that they feel cold all over, but cold hands, because also the adrenaline makes you shaky, but it also shuts down blood flow to the extremities. And also just having an inadequate energy supply or disordered metabolism, your blood flow is disordered. So you can have all kinds of problems related to that. And this is more in the long term. You can actually get erectile dysfunction, sexual dysfunction, because that's hugely blood flow dependent too.
Yeah.
So, but nausea is another super common side effect. So those are some of the most common.
Waking up in the middle of the night, because people wake up in the middle of the night because your brain's going, I'm not getting glucose. Why? Because when you and I are sleeping, and Ashley, we're burning our fat for energy. It takes tremendous amounts of energy to sleep for your brain, right?
Yeah.
And when the brain's not getting glucose, because you can't burn fat, right, and make ketones, so then what does it do? Uh-oh, I'm going to die. So guess what? It lights up cortisol or adrenaline, and guess what you do? You wake up. So your body saved its life, it saves its brain, but you wake up and go, I can't sleep.
And now you can't sleep, which makes it worse for the cortisol. So it's a vicious cycle. It's a downward spiral. And now that I've been doing the continuous glucose monitors, I actually see that the lowest time for what happens when a lot of folks have these issues where they can't burn their body fat, your blood sugar will drop somewhere between midnight and 6, and it'll be at low for you, which is too low for your brain, and there'll be like a little dip, and then I'll see it come back up again as that cortisol spikes, and I'll know that that's the time when somebody probably got woken up and couldn't get back to sleep.
Of course. All right, let's I talk a lot about how toxins cause this cellular problem where we can't burn our own fat for energy, et cetera, et cetera. And I teach deeply on how bad fats can cause the cell membrane to have problems. That's where the hormone receptors are, and that causes problems in the mitochondrial membrane. Yet I think that, people still don't get it. So let's make them get it. Okay, so you mentioned seed oils, right? These are polyunsaturated fats. Why would these be a causative factor for this problem?
Because they're unstable. So very simply, that means that they have a tendency to react with oxygen and when they do that, they turn into toxins. So it's like it's a latent toxic compound. And these are toxins with long names like 4-hydroxynonenal and 4-hydroxyhexanol. They are known cytotoxins. You put them in micromolar concentrations, meaning like 1/1,000,000th of a drop, and that they can kill cells with that little concentration. So they're not necessarily containing those toxins when you buy them, although the tests almost universally show that they have degraded. They're that unstable. They don't even stay stable in the shelf.
It's true.
And then they become even less stable when they get into your body, because now they're interacting with all kinds of other chemicals and the more that there are, it's like, it's like flint and oxygen, and it just starts a fire basically. And it's literally what it is, because it is burning. It's an oxygen reaction. And so it causes all kinds of problems, not just the fact that we have these toxins form, but even if on the way to calming down these toxic reactions, you have something called free radical cascades. And these are things that are like a domino effect of damage in a cell membrane. So it's one little molecule reacts with oxygen, and within a matter of a single second, you can have 9 billion other of the fatty acids in that same cell's membrane, one single second, all become damaged and dysfunctional. And that's going to take out a huge chunk of that cell's membrane, and it's not going to be able to function normally for a while till that gets fixed.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I have a PowerPoint. I was telling you this. It says 132 days of dysfunction, because when you eat these rancid seed oils, they make their way in, or vegetable oil, canola oil. So, it's a seed. But anyway, they make their way into the cell membrane and literally create 132 days on average of dysfunction. That's basically what you're describing, that these things get into your body. So, okay, so I know my viewers right now are going, whoa, wait, what are these oils, right? So give us, and I know you list them in your book, but give us the oils to stay away from. Well, can I eat, organic oil? Can I do this? Can I do that? So what do we eat, and how do we get the safe oils? Which ones are? Talk about it.
Yeah, those are also such important questions. So they're really literally the thing that can save your life. So there's 3 C's and 3 S's, and I want everybody to try and remember them. These are the most common seed oils. So we've got canola, corn, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower. Those are the most common that you're going to find. They are also—
I love that, 3 S's, 3 C's.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, because I tell people this, I'm not smart enough to do that. That's great. People can actually remember them now. Okay.
My boss came up with that. I got hired to this current job.
Okay, so you're not smart enough either.
No, he came up with that. So he gets props for that. Yeah, I was doing it all out of order. I was like, well, canola is kind of the most important.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Me too.
So they're also known as the industrial term vegetable oil. So vegetable oil refers to any one of those 6 oils, not to broccoli and peas, right? It's great branding on the part of like Unilever and Monsanto and all the folks who grow this stuff, because it sounds healthy, because vegetables, who could be against that? And my gosh, if you squeeze oil out of vegetables, that sounds like you're taking the goodness out. Don't believe it.
Sounds really healthy, actually. Yeah.
Right. It does. But it's referring to those 3 C's and 3 S's. And then when you go to restaurants, there's a couple more. It's kind of like A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y. Well, the sometimes Y of the vegetable oils are rice bran oil and grapeseed oil. And those it's the same idea. They're super highly polyunsaturated, and they generally are also highly processed, because the seeds don't want to give up these oils, and they have to be extracted under high heat pressure, often with a solvent like hexane, which is an ingredient in gasoline, and then it has to be removed. So that's the refining, bleaching, and deodorizing steps. And so that is where you strip out any shred of nutrition. So that's why I can still say, go ahead and have, sunflower seeds. or, you know, I'm not one of those people that's against soy. I'm sure you stand on that one, but you know, soy in moderation is fine, like any other vegetable in moderation. I feel like
I mean, a non-GMO soy, people say, oh, what about the phytoestrogens? It's fine in those amounts. Yeah.
Exactly. If you're basing your life on it, it's another story. You shouldn't do that with really anything. So if you want to consume it in soy, it's fine because it's still going to have the vitamins that the seed uses to stabilize to control the oxidation reactions to keep it stable. So there's all kinds of vitamins, antioxidants, and minerals that are in the seed, but they get stripped out, so they're not in the
my saying there is, I'm not against vegetable oil when it's in vegetables. I'm not against seed oils when it's in seeds, because to your point, all these protective measures are there. So, and I just want to, polyunsaturated fatty acids are very, very, very unstable. To your point, they're denatured right out of the gate, right? So, and that's what we're talking about here. So when you look at your olive oil, you could say, well, where does that fit in? It's it's mostly monounsaturated. It can take heat better, right? And saturated fats can take heat even more. Polyunsaturated, just to be clear, are what you're referencing. So
absolutely. And I have, since this is such an important part of my message, I have my website, one of the main accessed pages on it is my list of good fats and bad. So if you just Google Dr. Cate list of good fats and bad, it should come right up. And it helps, it's something you can take a picture of, keep it on your phone and refer to it. And then the document itself kind of explains a lot of it, because I'm sure you've been through this, Dr. Pompa, but you probably get attacked by, dietitians and people who believe that canola oil is somehow special because it's got omega-3 fatty acids, or that don't understand what they're talking about, honestly, when they say polyunsaturated fatty acids. And I
get attacked even worse than that, and I don't even know where you stand on this, and it's okay if we disagree. Fish oil is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. So my saying here is, I love fish oil when it's in fish, but I hate fish oil. So again, I get hate mail, but listen, I've dug at the studies. I don't believe it. But anyway, where do you stand on that?
I know, I totally agree. So I'm happy to hear you say that, because it is kind of like an outlier position, because everybody feels like, oh, it's the antidote, because there's so much talk about the ratio of omega-6 and omega-3, and omega-3 being like, okay, well, now we need to supplement with that. And, I would love it if it were that simple, but really what it looks like is that you just have to stop eating so many of the seed oils, like, including canola with omega-3. But
grain-fed meat throws that ratio off. It's grain-fed meat is loaded with 6. So to your point, they say Americans are 21/6 to 1/3, meaning way too much 6. Yet look, my study of the membrane is the omega-6 is the king of the membrane. It's the most important, actually. So it's not that omega-6 is bad. We're eating all of these vegetable oils, seed oils, grain-fed meats, which we're R6 dominant. We want a better ratio than that, but that doesn't mean you eat more 3.
No,
that's a good point, I think.
Exactly, because what happens is, so if we want to talk just for a second about how it builds up in our bodies, you talk about how it builds up in your cell membranes. It builds up in our body fat too, and to a massive amount. Like, the cells do their best to regulate the polyunsaturated fat content that they have, because they've got a recipe that they're trying to follow, and they do their best. And when they say no to those polyunsaturates, where does it go? Well, you can't get rid of it. It goes to your body fat. There's only 2 ways to get rid of it. You have to burn it, or it can come out, and like if you're a woman, you can feed it to your babies through breast milk. But you have to burn it. And so until you can burn it, it has to be stored, and of course it's stored in your body fat.
That's right.
Now, if we look at how much was in there 100 years ago, before there were all these industrial seed oils, before plant fats were 80% of our fat calories, when they were really just like 10 to 20%, and the rest of it came from animals. Our body fat had about 2, 3, maybe 5% polyunsaturated fatty acid. Now, when they do biopsies, it has up to 25%,
Wow.
and some maybe even as high as 30, because the last study was done when the average consumption of this stuff was a lot lower, and our body fat percentage of PUFAs almost exactly mirrors our dietary percentage of PUFAs. And right now, for some people, that's 30%. So your body fat's going to be 30% this stuff. And that what that does, and one of the things that kind of like is the most important study in the book, The Fatburn Fix, is a study I found. It shows what happens when these things are the fuel for your mitochondria. When it gets released from your body fat, now your mitochondria are going to burn it. They can't say no either. These things will get into your cells and get into your mitochondria, and then your mitochondria will try to burn them. And what happens is it shuts down the mitochondria's ability to produce energy. So we're talking about the energy powerhouses of every single cell in your body. If your body fat has too much PUFA in it, then every time you're trying to burn your body fat, you're going to the gym and working out, you are damaging your mitochondria. You're shutting down your cell's energy production from fat. And what do they have as a backup plan? Sugar.
Because now we're leading to cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all the #1 killers.
Exactly. And what you feel is that hypoglycemia. You feel that, like that's because it's not because you need to regulate your blood sugar by eating. It's because your body is so dependent on sugar that you can't get enough in your bloodstream to feed all the cells that need some at any given moment in time, because blood sugar is regulated. That's what diabetes is, when we can't regulate our blood sugar anymore, type 2 diabetes. And so if you are a non-diabetic, you can only have about 3/4 of a teaspoon of sugar in your bloodstream at any given time, which is about 3 grams, which is about 12 calories. So, I mean, how much exercise can you do burn as a sugar burner, right? You have to have tons of glycogen in your muscle, and that's how your muscles store sugar. And so if you're an athlete or, into fitness, all of these studies that talk about, oh my God, you need to have glycogen, you need carbo loading is so important to fill up the glycogen. Those are done in people who have this problem that I'm describing, where they can't burn their body fat because they live in America. Right. We all eat too much of this stuff unless we are looking out for them. So they can't, our athletes even this goes back to the skinny people.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I can go, typically I don't even eat my first meal until 3 or 4. Half the time, I'm not hungry. I'm going through, matter of fact, the busier I am, I don't even know, because my body's eating from its body fat. That's it. I mean, so it's doing its job. But to your point, I love that explanation of, how these fats end up being burned into mitochondria. And, that was well said. I mean, that really files up, the whole system of why you can't burn your own fat.
And it damages the mitochondria. So it helps you understand where we get all these mitochondrial diseases from, right? Cancer, we know, is a mitochondrial disease, but neurodegenerative diseases like multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and these serious.
So you think, I mean, everybody watching this, everybody that, that knows a little bit about health, we all would agree and understand that sugar is part of the metabolic issue. Do you feel this is a bigger issue, that these fats are causing than sugar to the mitochondria? Because everyone says, the sugar is why the mitochondria is failing, leads to cancer. But is this the bigger problem?
I do understand that is the bigger problem now. Like when I first started, when I wrote Deep Nutrition, I was like, well, they're both really bad, just to avoid both of them. Yeah. But I really feel that this is worse, because
Me too, by the way. Me too. We're on a very small island.
Very small.
Just a couple people. I don't know.
Yeah, so a bunch of crazy, like Gilligan's Island, and one day they'll rescue us, and they'll be like, "Thank you." That's my fantasy anyway. Yeah. But because like if you eat too much sugar, you store it as fat. Yeah, that's not great, but your body can control what kind of fat it's stored as. And it can store it as saturated and monounsaturated fat. in fact, that's how it stores. It has to store it that way. We can't store sugar in the form of sugar in our body fat. It gets converted to fat. And we can't make polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's why we do need some in our diet, which is why this whole topic is so confusing to, people who have a little bit of information.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But we have to get it from where it's protected because it's so fragile. That's why seeds are great, but you get some of the polyunsaturated fats that you need, and you get it in a protected form.
Yes, exactly. And, when we talk about the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, I was looking at some of the traditional cultures that would be getting a lot of potentially a lot of fat. How much omega-3 are they getting? And so because somebody posted a really good question on one of my websites about, what about like the Eskimos? Because if you're saying omega-3 is so bad, and Eskimos get a lot of their fat from salmon, or they said salmon, but actually they really also got a ton of it from seal. What's the composition there?
So more from seal, truthfully. To your point.
Yeah. So that actually, according to what I could find, seals have a huge amount of highly unsaturated, polyunsaturated fatty acids, like the omega-3s, the long chain ones. And they've got somewhere, at least like 15%, which is a huge amount of that extremely unstable. Some parts of them may even have as much as 20%, but it's totally different because they ate it without cooking it. And it was cold all the time, so that the reactions were slower, and the fish themselves can have all this polyunsaturated fatty acid and in their body fat, and the seals can, because they're in freezing cold Arctic water, and it's the temperature that really has a huge impact on the nature and the constitution of your body fat. What I'm saying is like basically the recipe for your body fat. What is the right amount of saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated? And human beings who are in, we've got a warm environment most of the time because we wear clothes. We need a lot more more of the stable stuff. Right. And so that's why when we eat too much sugar, that's what we make, is the stable stuff. And so even though sugar is not, I'm not a fan of too much of anything, especially not sugar, but at least we can basically detoxify it. As long as we are not diabetic, we can still detoxify it by essentially getting it out of our bloodstream, getting it out of our tissues, and storing it in safe haven in our body fat in the form of saturated, monounsaturated fat.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Right. So the sugars, we have, avenues to burn it or store it as saturated or monosaturated. These fats, we don't. Okay, so you kind of tipped into this fish oil conversation, right? Fish oil is like antifreeze, right? I mean, they're cold water, right? So how much do we really need? I've interviewed Brian Peskin on the show. He found me because he heard me talking about the dangers of fish oil and the cell membranes. But he talks a lot about the parent fats, which are your alpha linoleic acids, right? Your omega-3 and omega-6, the parent fats. But what people don't understand is we have the ability to make DHA from those fats. They're called the derivatives, right? So meaning that we don't need fish oil. Otherwise, what about people inland? They would die, wouldn't they? Because they didn't have access to fish. They didn't have trucks that would bring it in. But when we look at these parent fats, the alpha linoleic acid and then the linoleic acid, you can take those and make these other fats, that people say are so important. The brain needs very little, actually. I mean, the brain needs DHA or, some of these omega-3s more, but it's not as what people think. Talk a little bit about that.
So we can make it. I want to talk about why for a second, just like why you hear it said so often that we can't elongate it. That's because when you do studies in a situation where you don't recognize that the animals you're studying are getting too much PUFA, and it's not, or they're getting trans fat.
Yeah, when you said PUFA, that's polyunsaturated fatty acid. So
Thank you.
Yeah. PUFAs are polyunsaturated fatty acid. Now you can say PUFA all you want. Okay, got it.
That's the best. PUFAs go poof. They're unstable. That's how I like to help people remember it. So the animals are fed, animal chow that's made of corn oil. So they are being studied, and this is how they've come to a lot of conclusions that, oh, well, animals can't extend, humans even can't extend, lengthen. They're taking the parent molecule being at 18 carbons, and the ones that your brain's made out of being made out of, 20, 22, 24. But that can't happen in animals, including humans, who have too much trans fat in our diet or too much omega-6, because we have damaged enzymes. And there's a very important enzyme for this elongation process that called, I think it's either delta 9 or delta 6 desaturates. I can't remember. It's been a while since I wrote the book Deep Nutrition, where I talked about it. But that enzyme is knocked out by trans fat and by high levels of PUFA and oxidation. So that's why we have this kind of, I guess, mythology out there that, oh no, you do have to supplement with the long chain stuff if you can't eat it.
That was well said, actually, because you're right. So when we looked at some of these original studies, they're like, oh my gosh, so little is converted. That's why we need it, right? We have to take fish oil, DHA, and da da da. It's like, but to your point, they didn't look what was broken, what was stopping the conversion. That enzyme is affected, to your point, by these bad, unstable fats. So interesting.
Yeah,
that's an interesting way. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, so that's like one of the missing pieces in so much medical or nutrition research, is that when they talk about, animal studies, especially the animal chow, is the fat is generally corn oil.
Mm-hmm. And they feed them corn, grain, GMO too, and all of that stuff.
Yes, exactly. It's and of course it's, stale, and everything about it is not what the animal would eat given the choice. So the animals are every bit as damaged as we are, as the people that, they're trying to do all these experiments to help, people who are metabolically damaged because of their diet. Well, they're giving the animals the same diet. So much of the research is skewed and confusatory because of that. It's almost like it's fake science. It's really, really, really crazy. And what do you do about that? How do you even prove anything? That gets to the topic of our first book. My husband and I wrote the first book together, Deep Nutrition. We talk about what is it that, we talk about nutrition science as if we're coming up with it today, as if we need randomized, epidemiologically, controlled studies to know anything at all about nutrition. There's no science, no valid science beyond what we put in our medical journals. Wait a second. People were healthier 100 years ago. Why don't we just do what they did? And how can we figure that out? Do we have to, do
a double-blind placebo study?
Right. We can look at cookbooks. So that's what my husband and I did. I looked at dozens and dozens and dozens of cookbooks written in English from all the countries I could get in English from 17 and 1800. And then I also watched a lot of travel shows about indigenous cultures.
Yeah, that's a cool way of doing it. First of all, they were cooking with lard, but they were eating grass-fed animals. So
totally different
fat
scenario.
was different, right?
Yeah.
They weren't cooking. They didn't even have vegetable oils. What are you kidding?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And to your point as well, is what studies actually have done is really screwed this whole thing up, because we're studying, broken people. We're studying, we're studying broken animals, right? We're studying, saturated fats are bad. It's like studies have gotten us in trouble. It's like, what did they do when heart disease existed? Well, they were eating a lot of saturated fats. What they weren't doing is eating these oils that we're talking about. This isn't rocket science. A question just popped into my mind before you said that other thing, and I have to ask it. And this is for our people who have struggled losing weight. Because we either burn these PUFAs, we're going to call them PUFAs now, or we store them as fat. So when they are stored as fat, we know that our good fat, like stored fat, we get, saturated or mono, those we can access and burn. Does our body have trouble taking the stored PUFAs and burning it? So does this end up to be the fat we can't burn, the cellulite, the bad fat?
There's a researcher I spoke to at UC Davis, Frances Sladek, who she felt that they do have like a bioaccumulation effect in our bodies, that they seem to maybe perhaps be less preferentially released compared to the other fat?
The reason I asked the question, because I didn't know the answer. Sometimes you ask questions you know and you want them to know, right? But it's like, I didn't know the answer. But the reason I came to the question is because of my major premise. The body, all it wants to ever do is survive, right? So, it knows that these oils are not good for their mitochondria. And if it has to burn them in the mitochondria and it damages the mitochondria, then when the innate intelligence reach for the mono and the saturated stored fats first, that was my thought.
Yes, exactly. And, I love that you do that, like that kind of like, well, if I were the body, what would make sense to me? And that's guided a lot of my thought processes, because it seems as though nature's pretty darn smart, and it's kind of smarter, way smarter than us. Yes. It's been, at this game for a very long time and very successful. And so that is exactly how I think about it. And so I didn't know how to go about pursuing the answer to that question, but I was just having a conversation around this woman's research with her, and she just spontaneously mentioned that, and I was like, oh well, that is just totally fascinating. And it does make sense in that paradigm. And there's a way to look it up. It has to do with the kind of different kind of enzymes, some that were only just recently discovered, that have a preference for certain fatty acids at certain location in the triglyceride, but I haven't done that. But what I have done is decided, so this is a hypothesis, that what happens is when there is a certain concentration of these PUFAs, so when you've been eating seed oils, when you're a baby, your body fat is kind of as nature would have it, right? You have more that ideal concentration. But as time goes on and we keep eating more seed oils every day, day after day, year after year, the concentration does go up in our body fat, and there's studies that reflect this.
Yeah, so, you're saying 25% versus 2 to 3%, which is normal. Okay.
Yes. And so, after a certain number of decades, then it does very much reflect your dietary consumption. And so what happens is the fat cells then are inflamed. And so we have this conversation around inflammatory fat and omental fat, as if it's only the omental fat. But I think a lot of folks who have enough seed oils in their body fat have every fat cell is inflammatory, because we know that these fat cells are not healthy. They don't produce the right hormones, and they don't respond normally to hormones, and they're incontinent. They can't hang on to fat, and so that they will release it all the time, between meals, even in spite of the fact that there's too much insulin in the bloodstream, and a healthy fat cell would normally be keeping that in there. And that's when people really get into trouble with their arteries, when your fat cells can no longer keep a hold of the fat that they're supposed to be storing, and they're incontinent. It basically just goes in for a little bit, and then it comes back out into the arteries. You aren't burning it for energy because the cells don't want it. They're getting sugar. That's when a person is in such a bad metabolic state. They start having heart attacks and strokes, and they have a real trouble regulating their blood sugar at that point. They get to where they're just very, very metabolically damaged and fragile. And they are at that point a ticking time bomb. And that can happen in your 40s if you've had enough of these PUFAs in your life. When I was in medical school, type 2 diabetes was kind of like a little more common than type 1. So, okay, yes, I'm in my age, but it, it was for elderly people, or it was genetic. But now we're seeing it, so common in people in their 30s, and even in children. So, I mean, it's got, there's just no way it can just be the carbohydrates that we're eating, because if you look at the amount, we're not eating any more carbohydrates than we were at the turn of the century. They're different. They're, more fructose, arguably, definitely more processed. But in terms of the volume, it's the same. But if you look at the amount of PUFA, we were eating somewhere around what was in our body fat, 2 to 3%. Now it's 10 times that much. And it's, how is that not like the first thing that people talk about when it comes to diet. It's just like, this is the outlier. I know, sure, sugar's not good for you. And you know, having a sweet tooth is not healthy, but you don't have a hope of curing your sweet tooth or seriously developing a healthy relationship with sugar while your body fat is forcing your cells to be addicted to sugar.
I couldn't have said it best. Gosh, we're gonna have you back on. I mean, literally, we are at the top of the show, and I'm going, gosh, I want to talk about this. I want to talk. These fats disrupt the cell membrane. They affect your detox, right? It's like, you know, the reason people are failing on diets is because of this reason, for what you just said, right? It's like, Cate, we have to write a book together, but you know what? I'm going to bring you back on the show, and I just want to continue this conversation. This is worthy of a part 1, part 2, honestly, because you know, we are on to the bigger issue, and there's so few of us speaking this message. The world needs to hear it. Folks, get rid of these fats in your diet. Buy Cate's book, right? I mean, you know, this is very few people know this information. So, Dr. Cate, thank you so much for being on here. I can't wait to have you back. It's funny, because at the top of the show, we thought you were on Cell TV already. So it was absolutely, that's right. You're going to be on a second time. I'm going to make sure Ashley will put the links in for Dr. Cate. Dr. Cate, again, thank you for being on Cellular Healing TV. Fix the cell.
Thanks so much. Right. This was fun. Thank you, Dr. Pompa.
I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, CytoDefend. Look, at a time like this, I think that our immune system and keeping our immune system up right now is more important than ever. I can also tell you that I pay attention to the things that keep my immune system on par and healthy. So glad that CytoDefend is one of our sponsors here on Cell TV. And it's a product that I use, my family uses, and hopefully you'll check it out. And by the way, you can check it out with the link right here below. If you want to try a free bottle, you can actually get a free bottle, just pay the shipping. And I think you'll reorder after that, but check it out.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing CytoDefend product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit freeimmunity.com. Again, that's freeimmunity.com. Well, that's it for this week. The materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you would like to purchase some of the supplements mentioned on this show, please visit the site as seen on CHTV.com and use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. Again, that's as seen on CHTV.com. Use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. And as always, thanks for listening.